Welcome to Natural Recovery from Suffering. This is Scott Killaby. Where are the angry monks and the vulnerable dictators? I'm driving around Vegas. It's where I live. All day I've been wondering, there's so many people here. You can maybe hear the cars in the background. I wanted to do this podcast where you could hear it, so you can feel that I've really been looking. I feel like, I can't remember whether it's Socrates or Plato that went around looking for the wise person. Back then they might have said wise man, and couldn't find that wise man, and determined that, well, I know that I don't know, but other people seem to know. And that's how the wisdom was found. Well, I'm having a similar dilemma as people throughout history, but I'm looking for something different. I'm looking for the angry monks. Where the fuck are the angry monks? Seriously, have you ever seen one? Let's get back to that. And where are the vulnerable dictators? I mean, how many dictators have you seen in your lifetime? There's a lot of dictators, if you know what I mean. And not a single one of them is vulnerable. Right? I'm not playing the politics game here. So don't think I'm talking about anybody that you know or who you're against politically. This is not that. This is something else. This has to do with consciousness. I'm looking for something. I can't find it. And that's why I'm doing a podcast. I'm hoping you can help me. I don't think you can. Because I've been on YouTube. I mean, where else do you have to go? YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and Google. And you should be able to find an angry monk. Now, I have Googled it, and you can find some images and different things. But it's not real. And there's stories of monks who, of course, fought against wars, but I don't know if they were angry. And I don't trust, like these days with AI, and like you can't really trust what you see. I don't even believe what I see, because I'm really looking for an angry monk, and I can't find one. Really. And I can't find a vulnerable dictator. And I've been looking everywhere. I mean, I've been to a lot of different like retreats and monasteries. I've given talks there. And by the way, I've never found an angry spiritual teacher. Yeah. Not really. And I'm thinking that's maybe we should just group that in there with the angry monks. You just don't find them. It's like a rare species. Like something you would see, I don't know, maybe even in an alternate universe is what I'm thinking. Like somewhere, and something happened, and then a bunch of monks got angry about something and couldn't let it go. In some alternate universe, and they're fucking pissed at like something about the meditation or something didn't go right or something. But I just don't see them here. I mean, the ones when the meditation doesn't go right, you don't see the monks get angry, or the spiritual teachers or the meditation teachers. If they do, it must come and go or something. Because I don't see it. Anyway, I'm an equal opportunist here when I'm looking for this, because, again, I don't like dictators. I mean, personally, I've never liked dictators. I don't have a problem saying that now that I've done my anger repression work. But I don't have any real energy on it. I'm just not going to vote for them. If I sense that there's somebody who's a dictator, then I'm not going to vote for that person. Because, look, it could be, this is the thing that is a little bit scary, actually. If somebody doesn't have any empathy or can't access that at all, well, that's a problem. Because then they could have their finger on a button, and that puts us all at risk. So I'm not going to vote for that dictator. But I tell you what, I don't think I'm going to vote for, if a monk tried to come into office, I wouldn't vote for him or her either. Probably. Because look, you're never going to fucking push the button, even if we need to. I don't want the button pushed But like, as a leader, you have to like at least let other countries know that you're capable, not that you're going to do it. And in fact, diplomacy is good. I like that. But I don't know if I want to vote for you either. And of course, you're not running for office. So I don't have to really, not usually. But I'll be damned if I haven't seen a lot of, see, the world is full of just some archetypes, isn't it? And you go in the world, I used to be in the legal profession, as you guys know. I was an attorney. And in that world, well, just like in the corporate world too, certain traits that you have are, let's say, rewarded. Even you can go up the corporate ladder if you have these traits. And empathy really isn't one of them, frankly. It's just not one of those traits. Now, if you have empathy, as long as it's integrated with the ability to lead these other traits, that's fine. But too much empathy, unless you're like maybe you're some tech guru or something that did it your own way. Hopefully there's companies out there with leaders who really do have empathy and can access and express that. But let's be honest, a lot of the corporations, I know the big law firms, were not headed by people who were, the big attorney in my firm wasn't walking up to me the first day and saying, "Scott, I'm so glad you're here, and I want to sit down and have lunch with you, and I want to talk, and get to know you, because we're just so glad you're not a number to us at all." It just didn't happen. And I read recently, and I don't even have any judgment on this. I just like to share it because I read it. Maybe you read it too. That it's actually quite possible that a lot of CEOs of like corporations they fall into the category of like psychopath or maybe sociopath. And I find that interesting and makes a lot of sense actually, because one of the characteristics of that is no empathy, seeming no empathy. So therefore, there's a trait, the lack of that, in which case there might be power and the ability to make decisions and leadership, and just kind of being a cold-hearted business person even can sometimes be rewarded. I left that world for that reason and other reasons. I didn't find a lot of empathy there were some attorneys who were really more attuned to their emotions, but it was a dog-eat-dog world. So I never found, of course, whatever I was looking for in that world, and I became a spiritual teacher. I became a monk in a way. That suited me better. And here's the thing about looking for angry monks and vulnerable dictators. Again, I didn't really have any interest in that back then, because I was a monk, so to speak, and I was not aware of being angry. So this is an interesting search that I'm on now, because this is not a search that I would have done, for example, when I started teaching. It wouldn't have been something that would have been interesting to me. I might have even shut or turned off a podcast like this, just like, oh, he's just being cute or something. I might even like been offended by it with anger repression, but I couldn't really admit it. Or I might find it lighthearted, but here's the point. I never would have done this search because I was that duality. And when you're that duality, you don't really look for those things, because you are one of those things in a way. I mean, look, I don't put any judgment on this. I'm just telling you, you can look at these ends of the spectrum that I often talk about. At one end of the spectrum, you got buried anger. And so the duality is within each person who has that, especially predominantly that, more than any other emotion repressed. You've got at the surface something opposite of that. And there's the monk. That's why I use that symbolically, not literally, when I say angry monk. Just that, well, it represents the spiritual teacher who doesn't get angry, for example. So, in other words, coming back to this little story here of my life, I heard of this spiritual teacher. What was his name? Nisargadatta. And I remember years ago hearing of this name and somebody saying, well, he's great teacher, very clear, all that. So I became interested, and then I heard, before I saw him teach, I heard two things. One was he would get angry at his students sometimes. I think I even saw a clip of it, if I remember eventually. And the other thing, he smoked cigarettes. I couldn't put those things together with what I thought being free was. And I couldn't put into words, and I didn't acknowledge it directly, that I couldn't put that together. All it was just like, okay, put him out of the process. He's not one of my teachers. So I didn't listen to him or read his stuff. And I went over to other teachers who wouldn't get angry at their students. I wasn't looking for angry monks and angry spiritual teachers. I was trying not to find any of those. So I found my teachers, and they never got angry at me. Nor did I get angry at them. And so I did, kept my anger buried. And that was the problem of my life, of course. Because I became then the angry, scratch that, monk spiritual teacher who was at the surface peaceful, good, kind, compassionate, empathetic, and identified with those things, but not as a story. It was an energetic identification. This is why I'm saying this is the main duality. It's all emotional. In other words, if I bury anger, I have to present as energetically as good, peaceful, kind, repressed, or compassionate, and then the stories that come on top of that are just the stories and the triggers and the shadows, and quite a lot of them have to do because they go against our identity, our more core identity, which is I have to be good, I have to be peaceful. This is like compulsions, actually. I have to be kind, empathetic. That's what I am. And so then we get triggered into, oh, I'm bad. You see me as bad. Or I'm not being empathetic. Angry. Anything. I can't be anything close to the anger is the point with the main duality. And so anything that is the opposite of that is okay. If we don't see that main duality here in spirituality, well, how are we going to find non-dual realization when we are the duality, walking around looking for that or claiming to have recognized that? Because the main duality is what produces it all. That's why we're showing up in a false way and suffering. It doesn't matter whether the stories go away and we just recognize present moment awareness energetically, we're still showing up as the calm, peaceful, compassionate monk type archetype. Or the vulnerable, not so vulnerable, dictator. Meaning, so here's the thing. Can I do the great reveal here for me? Is that there are angry monks and vulnerable dictators everywhere. That's kind of all there is. In a way. But I couldn't see it. I was only looking above the surface. At the conscious level, I hadn't gone to the unconscious yet. So I couldn't see the duality, the main duality within myself or other people. But now it's clear that if I could visualize it, or you could visualize it with me, imagine an iceberg, but the tip of the iceberg above the surface of the water is like a glacier, so there's just a lot there. But then under the iceberg, hidden, is just enormous. Can you feel that? But you can't see anything under the water. So whatever's enormous under the water, you don't have any idea about it. All you can see is this iceberg, the tip, that is. Now there's your visual. At the tip of the iceberg, if you're not aware of what's under the water, which is the buried emotions, the emotional repression driving everything at the surface, there's the duality, then what you see at the tip is, oh, here's a monk type archetype, or here's a spiritual teacher, here's a kind person, here's a compassionate being, and am I making that into a bad thing? No. Please don't look at it that superficially. Look at this as an energetic thing, that people have to do this to survive. This is trauma, and this is real, and it's really our duality if you look at it. People have to survive. That's what ego is at the tip of the iceberg. The ego is that. It's at the tip. And so it's what they show energetically, and what we show energetically to each other is all that we're aware of. We don't know anything else. We're doing the best that we can when we're not aware of buried emotions in terms of knowing what we really are. So what I did is, coming into spirituality, I, like my teachers, who I think a lot of them had repression under the water, I just became aware that, okay, the tip, everything in the tip of the iceberg is coming and going. In me, I'm the water. But see, it's not true. Because under the water is the emotional repression, the unprocessed. And that doesn't arise. And so to say that we're the ocean and that we just allow the waves, it's not true. When we have repression, there's so much more to the depth of the ocean. The enormous iceberg under the water is the driver of suffering. That's in our bodies. The trauma. So to ignore that and to be aware just of things coming and going, waves or the tip of the iceberg, whatever the metaphor, it's not going to cut it to end suffering. And in fact, that kind of thinking reinforces the duality of thinking that somehow if we just recognize what's here at the surface in our awareness, present moment awareness now, and I'm talking about the tip of the iceberg is just presence. Believe it or not, everything you're aware of here that you're experiencing is not reality. This is being produced by fear. What you're experiencing, your stories, your narratives, your identities, your traumas, your conflict or the avoidance of it, is all driven by something that you can't see. It's like dark matter. Don't believe me. You can find skills to discover it in your own body. There's no reason to believe me. Why would you? Because it's hidden. You have no reason to believe someone who points to something that's hidden. That would just be a kind of trust that you don't need. All you need to do is to verify what you hear. Trust me enough just to verify it. Because once you go under the surface of the water, you see something different than you ever saw before. So let me talk about this a different way. Even though, if I really went, I actually was driving around in Vegas today because I live here, and I wasn't really looking for angry monks or vulnerable dictators because I know they're everywhere. This is life. This is duality. And these are symbols. So what I want to clear up right now is I'm just talking about that. I'm not talking about dictators. I'm not talking about monks. I'm talking about energy. This is what realization and freedom is really about, is it's energetic. It's not about what we believe. That's an illusion coming from our fear. It's not about our spiritual realizations. They're fleeting. Our shifts, they're great, but if they're not embodied, we're still suffering. This is about seeing, deeply seeing through the veils of separation. But you have to embody this for this deep freedom in seeing that the below the water and the above the water are also one. That can't be seen until what's below the water is made conscious, though. And the monks of the world don't really want to do that. And the dictators, well, they don't want to do that either, because this is threatening, deeply threatening, to actually realize what is. It's not what's happening at the surface. See, the angry monks, because they are angry, if they bury anger, no matter how peaceful at the surface they are, if they never go into buried anger, they're safe to believe or say or think or not think, whatever. They're safe from the thing they were always afraid of, the thing that drove them, probably to being a monk. But it's also just to being a good person. You don't have to be a monk. It's not about them. It's a being a people pleaser, perfectionist, good boy, good girl, the best even, peaceful, loving, kind, good listener, empathetic. These are good qualities. I don't want anything that I'm saying to, because I don't believe that they're not good qualities. Without these qualities, we would have killed each other, I assume. But see, we're killing each other by identifying with these qualities. Really are. There's a scandal among us. Really. And it's repression. It's emotional repression, but we can't see it because it's buried. It's coming, though. Because what you're going to see when you do your own work is a lot of the people that we thought were assholes, we anger repressors. Can I speak to you for a moment? The people that we thought in the world were just the assholes, dickheads, douchebags, womanizers, narcissists. Some of the people we thought were sociopaths and psychopaths, some were maybe have that kind of issue going on, but there's just a group of people that controlling people, angry people, aggressive people, obnoxious people, arrogant, overly confident, the list goes on, authority. This is energy. And on the side of anger repressors, or the monks who don't know they're angry yet, is we deny our life force. Because we think on some level that we're going to become like the people that hurt us when we were kids. The dicks, the dads, the douchebag dags, the dads, the bullies. I can't think of enough D words, so it just fell away there. But we're afraid of that. We're afraid of being abusive, controlling, because that's what we faced when we were kids, many of us. We have every right to, from a sense of conditioning, have these archetypes that we just don't want anything to do with, or that we're at war with, or we're maybe even attracted to in some cases. But we have to have more discernment on this side, or we're not going to ever be free and experience true love within ourselves and others. Because this shadow of ours, where we look at that side of the spectrum, if you think of this as energy, there are two sides of the spectrum. Just to start, for an understanding in the mind, but you have to take it into experience. On one side of the spectrum, you've got we anger repressors, or what I used to be. On the other end, we have those who repress hurt or sadness or more vulnerable emotions. It's just not safe for them to feel and express those in the way that it might be safe for us on this side, the anger repressors, to feel and express vulnerable emotions. In fact, we might even be more identified with vulnerable emotions. I've met vulnerable monks. I have. They're everywhere. It's safe for an anger repressor to even identify with it. And who's going to call out a vulnerable person unless you're in the company of somebody who represses that, or even a compassionate or kind or peaceful person? Nobody really calls that out. Why would you? In fact, in spirituality, we hold these things to a sort of exalted level, these qualities. And I understand why, because they're peaceful qualities. They give us a sense that we may be able to get along. Humans. But how are we going to get along when the main duality remains there? And at one side of the spectrum, anger repressors make division and separation out of anger and power, and bury their own anger and power, and then identify with something false at the surface, and then have shadows around people who can be big or angry or whatever, without making good discernments between healthy anger and unhealthy anger, or who really is a dictator and who's just really a hurt child who grew up to be a man, who can't be vulnerable because he can't show hurt, or a woman. There's a difference between somebody who is a dictator or a narcissist and someone who is a dick sometimes because they're hurting inside. The dick sometimes who's hurting inside, that's not a dictator. But yet they kind of are there at that end of the spectrum. We kind of put them there, but they're hurting. And the people that are hurting in the world, that's what spirituality should be about. Doesn't matter what side of the spectrum you're on. If you're hurting and you're open, that's what this work is about. And if you're an anger repressor, even if you identify with empathy and compassion doesn't matter, right? Because if you're suffering, you're suffering. Repression is the driver of suffering. Look at the science. Driver of much suffering. I won't say all. So you have to take a look at this yourself. It's how important it is. This is why non-duality is really in the world to me. It's not to sit in presence and see things come and go when buried emotions never come and go. It's to see that the buried emotions and what comes and goes to awareness, that's the duality. We create our suffering from the unconscious. And what comes into awareness is only what we are allowing ourselves to see. What is safe to see and what is safe to feel and express. And because it's safe to feel and express, we might even be identified with it. Even if it's just being good or empathetic or angry at the other end of the spectrum and powerful. But to me, okay, look at what the authentic is. Let's talk about authenticity and transformation. If you take awakening, for example, to its completion, embodiment, these energies are all seen and discovered within you. You, presence, not you, ego. You, presence. You have all these emotions that you have shadowed out from your buried ones, but even the buried ones are yours. So the anger repressors are angry. The monks are angry. This is why they show up that way at the surface. Whether they own that is another question I'm going to get to. You can't answer that at the surface. You can't do it with your mind. You have to have skill, and you have to go under the water below the surface to where the buried anger is. You don't feel anger when you're a monk, usually, or a spiritual teacher, because we bury it. Unless you're a spiritual teacher that doesn't bury anger. That's the only thing I have to say. It's only our bodies that tell us the truth, not Scott Killaby. But I just want to say first, before I go too far off, is the people who want transformation, who want authenticity, will listen to this and say, yeah, well, of course, I fit somewhere on that spectrum. I'm either on one side of the spectrum, an anger repressor who has that I've been talking about, or the other end of the spectrum, I'm a hurt and sadness repressor, and I have this persona, this more powerful, bigger, even maybe even angrier sometimes persona. But there's everything in between. And that's the thing. And you can't represent all of that in a talk like this, but it's really a continuum, you could say. If you think of it that way, you can see it as energy, and it's not of the mind. It's not something for the mind to understand. Energy is the embodiment process, the somatic process, where you own all the emotions that you buried. Therefore, the suffering that they produce at the surface can go away. And there's the duality that we have to deal with to end suffering. And then the real compassion, the authenticity involves real compassion, which when I say real or true compassion, I mean not that which comes from repression, that comes because it's safer or is in some way used as in a divisive way through identifying with it. Instead of just natural, authentic compassion would include all the emotions within you. You would have self-compassion for whatever you buried if you were really clear and conscious. You would have, you would be transmuting that, or you would have transmuted that, because that's the driver of suffering. And for compassion to show up in a very real way, you would have to have fully self-compassion first. And how can you have self-compassion when major parts of you are buried? There's no way to have it. You don't even know yourself. Yet, presence is not what you are, it's the beginning of discovering what you are. What you've buried contains not only the embodiment of what you are to live it, but also your potential. It's the fear that holds you back. In a really deep transformation at the surface, that trait or quality of power is integrated fully in their presence. They already have empathy and compassion and these other qualities. These are things that are so natural for a lot of anger repressors. They don't have to do a lot of work in that area. There's no reason to run to the bliss and the love and the light anger repressors. See that? It comes pretty naturally to you. It's a safe place. Was to me too. Even awareness can be. Go to the buried anger, to the darkness. The only thing that can hold that darkness is the awareness. Only awareness can hold the parts of you that are buried anger repressors. The part of you that is buried most is the anger. That's your power. Until your power comes online, you'll over-identify with those other qualities for safety and to get love and approval from other people. But that creates division in the world. You just can't see it. You're like an angry monk. And angry monks can be not only codependent, but can actually encourage people not to get to buried stuff if they're teachers or helpers, and that can lead people into a bypass. It's very risky. People can get sick. Monks get sick. Spiritual teachers get sick. Why? Because they miss buried emotions. This is what Ken Wilber has been saying about the Eastern practices, is that so many people are missing the trauma and the emotional repression, and I'm a living example of how that happens. And see, there's a scandal before us. You don't see on Netflix the scandal about the teacher who was so loving and kind and compassionate that he or she welcomed masses of people, and then all of those people avoided buried anger, and many of them got sick or cancer or chronic pain or something. You don't see that. And if you ever see it, you won't see it for a long time, probably. No, because it's just, well, first of all, think about it. It's just not as good documentary. Because the Jim Jones documentary is much more, it's awful what happened there, but look at what good Netflix that makes. Or the teacher who really crosses the boundaries in an overt way. And that's not right. None of that's right. But see, repression is repression on either end of the spectrum. There's damage being done. Whether you're an angry monk type or archetype who denies the buried anger, or a vulnerable dictator who denies the buried vulnerability, the danger in that is not only just misleading people, it's not intentional, the misleading. When you're a dictator and you can't open to vulnerable emotions, you're driven by repression. There's a deception and a manipulation there. Your very identity is that. But also on the other end of the spectrum, if you bury anger and power and you show up a certain way at the surface, you're a manipulation in the same way, and a deception. And it's not just that you, in both cases, people come into powerful positions. See, even teachers, monks, but also CEOs at the other end, and dictators or leaders. This is where the narcissism comes in. And I have to just end with this, because it started out funny, but it's a serious topic. Because when you go listen to a lot of researchers, on YouTube, there are some people who know what they're talking about with regard to, they just have experience with people, whether they're therapists or researchers, and you can just trust and resonate sometimes with what they're saying. One thing I really resonate with what some of them say is they say, it's very difficult to define what narcissism really is, or to say that someone is a narcissist. Well, there's a whole diagnosis for narcissistic personality disorder, but put that aside for a second, because that's not what most of us are dealing with, that level of it. But I think rightfully so, these people say that it's just difficult because we all have these tendencies. And so to say, well, to carve out this subset of people that they're narcissists, well, how do you determine that? And I've heard quite a few of them say, well, the only thing that I can put my finger on is that often a person like that would not be self-reflective. No matter what's driving them or what's going on, part of the mask would be a refusal or an inability. maybe even being sort of constitutionally incapable of looking inward in a way that disrupts or interrupts the programming, because you get so much out of it when you bury something, because you can be something false at the surface. That's kind of the narcissism. And like with teachers and monks or leaders, there's a constant supply of people, who are also in repression and in trauma. And yeah, that's a dangerous thing. We just don't know it yet, the impact of trauma. I'm just touching the surface here in these places in life, but it's in every institution. And we just we don't know how to study it yet in science fully. It's so good that science has found the repression driving so many diseases and chronic pain and stuff, but there's so much more. And I just wanted to start with, where are the angry monks and vulnerable dictators? They're everywhere. You're talking to a reformed monk. I was going to say angry monk, but monks don't know they're angry, nor do people pleasers. So, because they're everywhere, it's all of us. It's all about just becoming conscious that you're either an angry monk or a vulnerable dictator in a way. In other words, we all have these emotions. We all have the qualities of presence, power, wisdom, love, vulnerability, authenticity, empathy. There may be some of us who classify as narcissists or psychopath, but you know what? Probably right, they're probably not self-reflective. So that's the issue, isn't it? Because if change or transformation is possible, we have to start with self-reflection. Otherwise, nothing would ever go below the water. No. If you don't go below the water, it's because you benefit from what's at the surface. If you're interested in what I think is the real non-duality, actually, and it sort of covers everything, because the repression creates the suffering, stuff we go to therapy and recovery for, and then we're trying to be mindful of, and it covers the awakening to presence, because only presence can hold everything. If you're interested, come talk to me. I put some links to my new, I'm not even going to tell you, I've got a new way of working with people. I put links, actually, just come talk to me for free. If you're earnest and you're seriously interested in working with me for a period of time, if you're the kind of person that would work with someone for a period of time because you're really earnest at looking at yourself and you want better tools, we have great tools. Come and talk to me and I'll get you started in that conversation about where to go here. And if you don't come and talk to me, go to repressiontest.com. There you take our test. You start to learn what's under the water, the buried emotions, and then that puts you on our newsletter automatically. Thank you.